Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway. Gayatri's on the beach in Bali, but she'll be back next week, nice and brown, I'm sure. Battle has joined. The battle over whether Britain remains in the European Union or decides to leave and join the world. Over the next weeks, we'll be interviewing many people from different sides of the argument. I put my cards on the table just the other week here on Sputnik. I'm for leaving. And therefore, there may or may not be fireworks in the next 25 minutes or so, because I'm interviewing the man who, more than any other, has brought us to this referendum. He scored 4 million votes in the recent general election. Not that he got much for his troubles. One MP who seems, if he doesn't mind me saying so, a little semi-detached from the United Kingdom Independence Party, whose actual leader, Nigel Farage, joins me for a special edition of Sputnik. Nigel, welcome.
Thank you.
To the show. I'll not pry into the private grief of the loyalties of your one MP, but I do want to turn to the grotesque situation that you can get 4 million votes and only get one MP later in the interview. But am I right? Has battle been joined? Is the referendum campaign now on?
Yes. Cameron next week will be at the European Summit next Thursday and Friday. He will come back and I will be very surprised if he doesn't call the referendum over the course of next weekend. It'll be June the 23rd and I'm 90% certain of it.
Me too, but let's see if we agree on the reasons why. Why wouldn't the government and those seeking to remain in the European Union, not just the government of course, why wouldn't they want a long, discursive campaign and a vote sometime perhaps in October?
3 very simple reasons. One is the migrant crisis will not get better over the course of this summer, and we're already seeing, after Angela Merkel's somewhat irresponsible decision to unconditionally open the doors, great tensions in many northern European countries. So the migrant crisis won't get better, so have the referendum before the summer. The second point is that you'll have noticed the stock markets taking a big downward dive over the course of the last couple of weeks. Why? We're back to 2008 in one way. Worries about the banks, worries about their liquidity, and of course that knocks on to the Eurozone. It is only a matter of time before Greece, fails.
Defaults, yeah.
Yeah, bounce it. I mean, what they've done to Greece, makes it virtually impossible for that economy to pay back the money. So fears that the Eurozone crisis could come back, or perhaps even worse. And the third reason is he doesn't want those of us who are going to campaign to leave to have time to organise, mobilise and get out there and campaign in the country. So for all of those reasons, it will be, I'm absolutely certain of it, in June.
You alluded to one of the reasons for going early, namely a perceived disarray in the Leave camp. I'm with you in this campaign. We don't agree on much. But we certainly agree on democracy and the need for our people to be in charge of their own destiny.
I mean, the whole point of this is, if you and I take different views, let's say on economics or government borrowing, the fact is we should be able to elect governments with people like you in it or people like me in it, and at the end of 5 years get rid of them.
Yeah, exactly. Elect them and get rid of them. And that's the one thing we can't do with the European Union.
Well, that's the point. And to me, the biggest single democratic point here is that every directive that comes from the European Union is proposed by the unelected European Commission. They have the sole right to make law and the sole right to repeal law. And there is nothing we can do, our government, our parliament or the British people, in elections, be they national or European, there's nothing we can do to change a single European law. And that, frankly, means we've given up on being a proper democratic nation, and I want democracy so that we can disagree properly.
Yes, quite. My teacher in this was my leader in 1975. I know I don't look old enough, but I was a campaigner in 1975 against joining the then common market, led by Mr. Benn.
Yes.
And Mr. Foote, for that matter, both of whom argued the principled democratic case, that we may or we may not, as a country, go down the road that Mr. Benn, Mr. Foote and I wanted to go down. But at least we had the right to.
Yeah.
In fact, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell's economic policy is illegal under the European Union. Many of the things that they want to do...
Absolutely, because you're stuck with 3% limits, you see, on what you can spend. And can I also say, on a sort of contemporary basis, what has happened to our steel industry over the course of the last couple of months? Look, we know it's a difficult, competitive global world, but what's happened? China's had a slowdown, and what they've done is they've literally dumped their steel on the world markets, and we're not able, as the United Kingdom, to say, whoa, hang on a second, that's
not here, mate. Yeah.
Exactly, that's not fair play. And the British government is impotent, the Scottish, Welsh governments are impotent. It's a classic example of how, as a part of this club, we cannot put the interests of our businesses and our people first.
Let's go back to the architecture point.
Yeah.
I'm with you, you and me, but who are we? Who else is involved, and how are they organised?
Well, we got two sides to this. It's basically Goldman Sachs v. the rest. No, well, in some ways it is.
It'll be good. That's a good line. It'd be good if we could picture it that way.
Well, it's the unholy alliance of big banks, multinational businesses and big politics that is on one side of the argument. So you've got BSE, they've decided to call themselves. They should have thought about that, really, shouldn't they? So Britain's stronger in Europe.
Mad cows all
I know, absolutely. That's led by Lord Rose. And they used to run Marks and Spencer's.
Well, that went well.
But quite. No, absolutely.
Are we going to do as well as Marks and Spencer's?
So he's running the official campaign. Then you've got the Labour Party, who are going to do their own thing. They're not going to join up with the official campaign. Alan Johnson will do his own thing on behalf of the Labour Party. Then, of course, you've got the SNP, who, again, will do their own thing. So there are three distinct camps who are campaigning for us to stay in, but they're being funded by... Goldman Sachs.
Wow.
And JP Morgan, the very people who I suspect many viewers of this show...
Including the Labour campaign?
Well, that we don't know yet. What we do know is that they're going to fund the BSE campaign. Labour are relying on trade unions to fund the campaign, but I've detected, particularly with TTIP, this transatlantic deal...
It's the only way we can get out of TTIP is not to be in the European Union.
That's right. And I'm sensing that for the first time in nearly 40 years, the trade union movement are beginning to look at this European project in a slightly different light. So Labour may struggle for funding, but that's that side. And yes, it's backed, as I say, by big banks and the big multinationals. And the multinationals love Brussels because they actually get to set the rules themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
To the disadvantage of all the small and medium-sized businesses. Now, on the outside, I have to be frank, it's not been easy going. There are two distinct groups, one called Vote Leave, Westminster-based, very Tory, good research, clever people, but who tend to talk purely about the economic arguments, against the more populist campaign led by Aaron Banks called Leave.eu, which is aimed to get support amongst the general public and has talked more about border controls, security and things like that. And frankly, there's been a pitched battle going on between these two groups, and whatever the rights and wrongs of it, I think they've both done reputational damage to each other through this. So I'm part of a new initiative which has come through the middle, and that's called GO, Grassroots Out. And we've got, from Labour, we've got people like Kate Hoey involved, myself obviously, and all the UKIPers. There are some Tory backbench MPs involved, and indeed David Davis.
And some old trade union lads.
And we get John Boyd, who was a veteran of that campaign back in 1975 that you talked about, shared a platform last Friday night in Manchester with me and others, with Simon Heffer, who is a commentator who's very much on the right of British politics. So what we're doing is we're bringing together the left and right under this GO umbrella, and we will now appeal for the designation. And what I want to do, I'm not interested. This isn't about left and right. It's about right and wrong. And we should be a self-governing nation, and that's what we're going to try and do.
Yes, and of course I wouldn't dream of joining the Tory bigwigs. I saw them in the streets of Westminster yesterday, Liam Fox and so on. I just couldn't join with them. So we'll probably join up with Go, not because we agree with the other parties, even John Boyd, but because we have to have some form of common action.
Absolutely.
And in Scotland, Jim Sillars, very popular nationalist politician.
I have to say that Scotland, we've had this big debate about what the European Union is and what it means, and it's been raging in England for years. It's bypassed Scotland.
Yeah.
Because the word independence, and remember, this referendum is about, do we want to be an independent country or not? Mm-hmm. The word independence in Scotland has meant something different, and there is this myth put out by the Edinburgh media that the whole of Scotland loves the European Union.
That's not true.
And it's not true, but there's not been a proper debate in Scotland. And I think once it starts, we'll be very surprised, because we'll find that Scottish opinions on this are very similar to the English.
Now, the June 23rd, you say, same electoral register that the current elections in Scotland, Wales, London and so on are fighting on. Is there a demographic issue here? Do we have a strategy of approach to the minority ethnic communities, for example, to young people?
What's interesting is all across Europe, the movements that have sprung up against this failing, can I say, established order. If we look at Podemos in Spain, we look at Syriza in Greece, very much on the left of politics. And what you see is overwhelmingly their voters are under 30. Look at Marine Le Pen in France, very much on the right of politics. Overwhelmingly, her voters are under 30. You look at even Beppe Grillo, the comedian, who's now on 31% in the Italian opinion polls.
Wow.
Yeah, and he said to me, very few voters over 50 support him. So across the continent, it's the youth that...
It's a revolt, Nigel. It's a revolt against the prevailing orthodoxy, which Dr. Johnson described as the grimmest dictatorship of them all.
Quite. Here it's not so simple. Here, at the moment, the under-30s are in favour of staying part of this union. And do you know something? When I look at the universities around this country, and when you realise there are nearly 300 Jean Monnet professorships in British universities. And you begin to think, actually, our youngsters have not been exposed to both sides of the argument. So the answer to your question is that to win this referendum, we've got to put together, under this Go umbrella, the biggest alliance of people from across all ages, races and spectrums that we possibly can. If we do it, we will win.
I'll be right back with more of this. Welcome back to Sputnik with me, George Galloway, orbiting this particular world this week with Nigel Farage, the leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party and the man who, more than any other, has brought us to the point where we're going to get a chance to vote on whether to stay or go from the European Union. Nigel, the arguments then, let's distill them. I've got my own, of course, but you're the guest. Tell me first, what are your best 3 or 4 reasons why we need to leave?
I'm with Churchill. Democracy is a dreadful system, but it's by far the best that mankind's yet invented. And we're part of this club. Yeah. As I said to you earlier, well, we can't change a single European law through the ballot box. That is wrong. I believe in parliamentary democracy. I believe it's something that is fundamentally important. I believe it keeps the peace, within our country. And I want us to be self-governing. I want us to be independent. I want us to set our own economic policies, which people like you and I can argue like cat and dog about, but set our own economic policies. But I also think that limiting ourselves to thinking that Europe is the be-all and end-all of the world is a massive mistake.
I think that's the biggest argument.
Massive mistake.
They pose the EU as the internationalist option.
It's
but
the
actually,
opposite.
the vast majority of countries in the world are not in the EU.
Quite. And I mean, look, there are 2.2 billion people inside the Commonwealth. From India to Australia to right across the world. This remarkable club, which comes together for summits where we're friends, where we share a common language. I mean, goodness me, these countries fought beside us in 2 world wars. There is a very strong link and bond. And what we've done is we've turned our back on this big international community, almost family.
Some of whom, indeed, are doing rather well.
Well,
having a special relationship with India is something to have.
Quite, and look at Canada, it's done wonderfully well. Australia, I mean, many of these countries have done phenomenally well. So I want us to be, quite frankly, it's out of, not Europe, but it's out of political union in Europe.
Yes, because of course we'll still be dealing with Europe,
well,
still
this
be
is
trading with Europe.
This is what upsets me. You know, Lord Rose, he of Marx and Sparks fame, and all the others, they kind of say that we'd be becoming isolationist if we left. No, we wouldn't. And we sometimes underestimate our own power here, you know. We are still the 5th biggest economy in the world. We are still the 8th biggest manufacturer in the world. We do have a seat on the UN Security Council. We speak the world's language, for goodness sake, and I want us to play our role in the world, not to be an 8% vote in Brussels at the Council of Ministers.
And the Commonwealth is one thing, and I agree with you on that, but the BRICS are something even bigger.
Sure.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran now coming back into the international economy.
Yeah.
Wouldn't having a special relationship with these kind of countries be more profitable for us than what we currently have?
And here's the clue. Here's the clue, you see. Very few people realise this, but as the 5th biggest economy in the world, we are forbidden from making our own deals and trade relationships with any other country on earth. That must be done for us by an unelected bureaucrat based in Brussels. And that, when you think about it, and we're told... I did a big debate with Nick Clegg in 2014 in the run-up to the European elections, and Nick said, Britain's not big enough and strong enough to negotiate its own trade deals. I said, look, Iceland, with 250,000 people, has just signed a trade deal with China. I'm certain that if they're big enough to do it, we're big enough to do it. But here's the key. What Clegg meant isn't we're not big enough. We're not good enough. Our political class no longer think we are capable as a people of running our own affairs. They've lost faith in this country and its people. Well, I haven't. And what will win us this referendum ultimately is people saying, do you know what? We are blooming well good enough to live in a democracy, make our own rules, control our own borders and live our own lives.
It's even worse, you know, that it's not just that we have subsumed our right to make trading deals with the rest of the world. We have a foreign policy which is run by completely unelected people. I mean, Catherine Ashton.
She rose without trace.
Rose
never been elected to anything.
Never elected to anything in her life, and she ended as the European foreign minister.
Yeah.
In which position she picked a fight on our behalf with half of the BRICS, if not more than half. So it's not just that we're not allowed to make individual bilateral deals with them. We're towed along in a foreign policy of unremitting hostility to them.
This is one of the sort of secrets of British politics. When Cameron came to power in 2010 with the coalition, within a few months of taking office, he signed us up to being part of the European External Action Service. Now, this was never part of any Conservative manifesto, and indeed many Conservative voters would have been appalled to think they'd do this. So there are vast areas of the world in which there is no independent British voice on foreign policy. We're happy for it to be done on our behalf by the European Union. And I've said again and again that, I'm not a friend or fan of Putin as an individual, but the point is to have provoked Putin, which is exactly what we did over the Ukraine, shows me that actually a European Union with a big, active foreign policy could actually be quite a danger.
Yeah, and it's not about... I mean, I respect Putin, and I think he's very popular in Russia, and that's the point. He's the leader of Russia, not the leader of anyone else. But we shouldn't be being put into things which are against our national interest when we have no democratic right to alter it. I mean, we could not have told Catherine Ashton to take a different view on the Ukraine. But if we had our own foreign minister, we could.
And historically, of course, one of the things that Britain has done is tried to hold the balance of power in Europe, to try and stop bad things happening across Europe, and we're beginning, bit by bit, to surrender that right. I think it's a huge mistake. We should set our own foreign policy.
Let's turn to the issue of democracy at home. I alluded to it in the introduction. It's not that we're saying, certainly not that I'm saying, that what we currently have in Britain is somehow perfection, and that we should, in an isolationist Little Englander way, withdraw into our shell. I want to see many, many changes here in Britain, and one of those is pointed up by the frankly grotesque situation where your party got 4 million votes and one MP to show for it.
Yeah. Well,
and I told Blair and Brown, face to face, man to man, just the two of us, in 2 separate conversations, when they had a landslide majority in their pocket, this is the time to introduce fair voting in Britain, so that people get the number of MPs related and proportionate to the vote that they got.
I mean, you know, never in the field of British democracy have so many been represented by so few. I mean, you know,
that's a fact. That must be true.
I mean, it was. I have to say, personally, I found last year pretty tough and pretty wounding, really. You know, to have managed to get 4 million people to support us, despite, you know, unbelievable sort of media aggression towards UKIP and misrepresentation in many cases. Look, we need to have a more representative electoral system, but can I say 2 other things? One is that the postal voting system is so corrupt and so wrong, we should scrap it and start again.
I opposed it from the beginning.
You know, I mean, it really has led to terrible things going on. I'm happy for a postal vote if you're 94 years old in a wheelchair, or you're in the British Army serving around the world.
You know that you're going to be working in Saudi Arabia at that time.
Let's take postal voting back to what it was intended to be. And the other thing, and people aren't noticing this, money. Money, money, money. It appears that at by-election after by-election, the Conservative Party have quite deliberately and willfully obeyed the law of this land and massively overspent in elections. Now, there seems to be almost a pact between the Labour and Conservative parties that if they're defending seats in by-elections, nobody will report on the other. Well, for goodness sake, if we're going to have elections, we have to have rules, and we need to have an electoral commission that actually enforces those rules. I would hate to see British politics become like American politics, where it becomes all about big money.
Michael Crick on Channel 4 News has apparently scooped the pack on this, and I wanted to ask you about that. I was shocked that you didn't win your seat. No doubt you were yourself, especially as your party won control of the local authority on the same day. But it now turns out, according to Crick, who's quite a serious journalist, Channel 4 News, quite a serious outfit, that there were many items of expenditure that the Tories engaged in that didn't appear on their election returns. Does that raise the possibility of a rerun of a by-election?
Well, I don't know is the answer to that. I mean, I suspect, given what Crick has unearthed, and maybe there's more to come, who knows?
He says there is.
Yeah, that's right. I suspect there'll be somebody in Thanet who will make a proper official complaint to the police and let it take its course. From my perspective, you know, if this referendum that I spent 20 years fighting for is on June the 23rd, I've got to look forwards, not backwards.
So let's move to predictions. Neither of us has a crystal ball, but here's mine. I believe the only way is up for us. The only way is down for those who want us to remain in this neoliberal club called the EU. I don't think that it's ever going to be more popular than it is, and with every week that the campaign is joined, it's going to get less popular. And I suppose my memory goes back to the alternative vote referendum. Nobody voted on whether we should have AV or not. They voted against Nick Clegg. And because they didn't like him, they didn't like what he'd done, putting Cameron into Downing Street and so on. If this referendum is, and it seems it must be, led by David Cameron, George Osborne, Peter Mandelson, and the other discredited members, largely discredited members of the political class in Britain, they're going to lose votes hand over fist. So my prediction is that we're going to win, and that on June 23rd, the British people will vote to leave. What's yours?
I agree. I think there is a very significant piece of British history going to happen in a few months' time. I think we are going to vote to leave. Do you know something? It could realign British politics in all sorts of extraordinary ways. I think this could be the start of a real fundamental change in British politics. And by the way, once we've left the European Union, my next campaign is to get fairer, better politics in Britain.
I think that's right. Life will not end for Britain if we leave. The world will become our oyster instead of this collection of states, some of whom were totalitarian states not so long ago. Some of them have very powerful far-right, extreme-right political formations. There's only trouble ahead, it seems to me, if we remain in the European Union. The world can become our oyster, but Britain will not be perfect and will have to be improved. Will Cameron fall if he loses the vote on the 23rd?
Well, let me tell you something. If a Prime Minister who, through this renegotiation, has tried to pull the wool over the eyes of the British public as to what he's achieved, and having lined up with the big banks and the big businesses and done everything humanly possible to win a referendum, why would I trust that man? If the will of the people is for us to divorce ourselves from this, why would I trust that man to do that job? He's got to go.
Yeah, whether he will fall is one thing. Whether he should fall, quite another.
We'll wait and see.
Nigel Farage, been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Gayatri will be back next week, but I've been George Galloway. He's been Nigel Farage. We're both, as it happens, on the same page, at least on this one. It's been marvellous.